Have you ever played a platformer where you just really wanted to change the level? Or you wanted to move that platform just a little bit to the right so you can make that seemingly impossible jump happen? Well, Semblance is here to fulfill those desires. Nyamakop Studios builds Semblance as the world's first true platformer. With a beautiful art style that separates it from most indie games, I'll be talking about if I think this game is actually worth your money. Please note that we did receive a game key for review purposes. With all that out of the way, my name is PushDustIn, and let's go ahead and get started with this review. Semblance has a pretty unique take on storytelling. There's a very short cutscene at the very start of the game, but for the rest of the game, the lore is left to be discovered by the players as they complete the various areas. A lot of the time, players will need to actively search out cave paintings that will depict the story of Semblance, as a lot of them are not on the main path. This does mean that Semblance story does take a backseat to the main draw of the game, the gameplay. While Nyamakop Studios would say that Semblance is the first real platformer, I would argue it's more of a puzzle platformer. There isn't a lot of platforming, and at most, players will need to adjust 3 platforms in order to collect an orb. There isn't a lot of enemies or things that can kill the player either. In order to progress through the game, players will need to collect orbs from 4 distinct areas. The areas generally introduce one gimmick, with each level or set of puzzles focused on using that gimmick in different ways. For example, a light beam that resets platforms is first introduced in one of the earlier areas. While the first set of puzzles deal with this simple element, later puzzles in that area will begin to require players to use the beam in unique ways, such as using the beam to launch the players upwards. There isn't a lot of gimmicks in the game overall, but they are used in a lot of interesting ways. I was stumped a number of times as some of these puzzles are really clever. Perhaps the main draw of Semblance is the ability to actually alter most of the world. At first this feels really good, but I quickly realized that there are limitations to how flexible the platforms would have. For example, if the player starts to shift part of the platform in one direction, they cannot shift another part of the platform in another direction. This limitation makes the game feel more rigid than what it initially promises. This also drove me mad in some of the areas, as sometimes I'd have the right idea, but I didn't exactly deform the platform enough, or I deformed it too much in one area, which made some of the orbs very difficult. For a lot of the game, I really felt like the true enemy was the platforms themselves. The other major issue is that the game does not feature a save file. Normally this isn't such a big deal, and with the Switch account feature, it's easy enough to have multiple saves on one system. The problem is that once a player completes a game, the game resets. When I was playing through Semblance for this review, I was aiming to complete the main story and then go back and complete the optional task to get 100%. I was shocked when the game just reset on me and I had to start from level 1 again. I sent a message to the developers and they mentioned that there's another ending for those who had completed 100%. So I felt like I kind of wasted my time as I didn't know that. So my suggestion for Semblance players is to get 100% in each area before moving on, otherwise they'll have to complete the entire game again in order to see the true ending. I feel like Semblance presentation is where it shines. Overall, I love it. The art style is interesting and the color schemes are fantastic. Each area has its own distinct color scheme, which really helps give a player a true sense of progression in the world. There's also very little UI. In a lot of areas, I like this as it allows me to be absorbed into the world, but it also causes some issues. There are a couple of button prompts at the start of the game as it introduces players to the very basics, but Semblance very quickly takes off the training wheels. There are 4 trees which acts as the game's 4 areas. Within each tree, there is a number of levels or puzzles where players will need to collect orbs and find the hidden shrines. There isn't really a checklist per se that can be easily checked. Instead, players will need to rely on how the trees are marked to tell what area is completed and what isn't. Activating the shrines is required to get the 100% special ending. The main tree that designates the areas will let players know if a shrine has been activated or not. Outside of that, there isn't really a hint on where it is. It can get a little bit frustrating as not all the shrines are on the main path, and do require some extra exploration. This also means that if players want to go back and complete puzzles or shrines they didn't finish, they will literally have to backtrack or restart the level. This can get a little bit annoying. Overall, I feel like Semblance has a very polished art style and a very interesting mechanic. However, I feel like the technical drawbacks are really holding this puzzle platform from being the first true platformer. I really hope to see the developers expand upon this with a sequel, as I think it has a lot of potential. I give Semblance a 3.5 out of 5. Thank you guys so much for listening to this review. Let me know what you think about Semblance in the comments below. As always, make sure to smash that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with our news, reviews, and videos as they come out. You can also check out the social media links in our description below so you can follow me and the main account. This is PushDustIn reminding you to always return to the source.